to everybody. Hi, Blanca, how are you? Hi, Elias. We're just a small group this evening. Well, this evening for me, actually, it's midday there for you. Of course, some of you I know, some I don't. My name is Maria Vittoria Grassi. I'm one of the owner of Grassi Pietre. I'm welcoming you, of course, from Italy. And so you are on the other side, you know, of the ocean, but it's a nice way of keeping in contact. I just want to introduce you to the two people who are, you know, will help me on this seminar. Giorgio Valentini, who will lead the talk. He's in New Jersey.
Hi, guys. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, and then there is Giacomo, my co-workers that he was thinking about all this webinar here.
The ghostwriter.
And you know, these are becoming some regular appointments. So thanks for being here and for keeping up with this one and sharing with us these strange times. And just want, you know, since we're not so big of a group, I think we can keep it interactive. So feel free to, you know, interact, open your microphones if you need, or write on the chat. And we're happy to discuss the themes with you. And Giorgio, to you now.
Okay. Well, thank you, Maria Vittoria. I would probably recommend just to unmute everybody. I don't know if everybody's familiar on how to use in Zoom. And maybe, you know, you mute them again if it's necessary, because, I don't know, there's kids playing in the background or, you know, dog barking. But let's, you know, there's a handful of people, so let's make it interactive more than, which was the original idea when we first started this webinar. So let me share my screen. Give me 1 second just to get into that, and let me know when you can see it. Okay. Beautiful. We are talking, of course, about Palladio, because this is the point of the overall seminar, so webinar that we are doing. But here with a specific twist on wine and his passion for that, and his design of cellars, and of course our designs and work of cellars. There's a little quote from Pindaro: "Wine lifts the soul and the thoughts, and makes fears leave the heart." So it's a suggestion of drinking more wine, and I got my bottle here, which is one of those that will features. But getting into Palladio, let's give a little bit of a background and a recap of what we discussed in the previous webinars. So here we just mention a few of the highlights. First of all, he was not Palladio until later on in his life. Before it was Andrea di Pietro della Gondola, and that's why I kept the headings with this name. He was born in 1508 and died in 1580, so he lived 72 years, which is quite remarkable for the time. Well, we discussed a lot about his life and heritage previously, so here we just mention the highlights of Vicenza and Piazza dei Signori, sorry, the phone is ringing. Piazza dei Signori, the Basilica Palladiana, Palazzo Barbarano, Museo del Palladio. Those are all different buildings and places that are an enjoyable sightseeing that can be, I don't know, even just an hour or two, or a couple of days on the weekends. Not the most important, because there's certainly a lot of those that are important, but the latest one is the Teatro Olimpico, which I'll show you later on where it's positioned. Is his last work, and if you remember the dates, this was actually built in 1580, so he died a few years later, and was completed in 1585. So he was certainly not finishing, but just envisioned this project in his early days of his life. And this is the only one, actually, there's 3 of these Renaissance theaters, but even the other ones that are still being used, which are in Sabbioneta in the south province of Mantua. and the other one is in Parma, so not far away, which is about 2 hours west of Vicenza, are still theater that are being used today for performances. So, I mean, this is another good point that you should consider. But here is the map, and basically, you know, I suppose everybody recognizes Italy, and we are talking about this region here, which is the Veneto area. This is the map, I mean, where I pinpointed. You can see that this is downtown Vicenza. Sorry, guys, I'm having two screens, so sometimes I tend to look away from the camera, but the important is the desktop. And basically, I just went on a Google map and I zoomed in. So this is the center of the city, and you can see that it's a pretty small city. And the important part of the most of the the architectural works that you will see are actually, like you can see here, literally 10, 15 minutes distance. I originally marked here from the Teatro Olimpico, which is the last one we saw, to the Basilica Palladiana, which is typically the first thing you see if you have only 5 minutes to look to do sightseeing. But with another 5 more minutes, you can actually walk to the Taverna Osteria Il Cursore. And I highlight this because, well, first of all, it's lunchtime and we're talking about wine, and, you know, we cannot ignore this. This was actually the osteria where Palladio used to go. It still has some historical reference here. You can see here in the little logo, Locale Storico. And I want to ask what cursore means. You know, the translation would be mouse. I don't think back then they were thinking about our mouse. The logo looks more like a kid delivering, so probably more like a Grubhub first example. But anyway, the Osteria is still open today. It's actually, if you Google, I tried to get some historical information. I got more about the menu and the, you know, the everyday things that the tourist will look for. But it's something that is certainly worth, you know, spending a few, you know, an hour and stopping there. From here, you know, we'll be again looking at this map. The main part we'll be discussing is actually just north of Verona in the Valpolicella area. Just to give you a few reference, Vicenza is here, and these are the Berice Hills where the quarries are, and we saw this pretty much in depth in the very first presentation that is also available online, and eventually, at the end, we can discuss if it's worth reviewing some of this. But because we're talking about wine, pretty much everything in this territory has to do with wine. Over here, there's also Durello, which is kind of a, you know, for those of you that don't know, it's sort of similar to Prosecco. Prosecco is all up here, so you can see that the landscape, the territory, the earth, the sun is pretty much the same. And, you know, Monte Grappa, it gives the name to Grappa. I don't know whether it was first the Grappa or first the mountain that got the name. But certainly there's a lot of wine everywhere. And this is pretty much the images that you will see if you are driving by. And even the aspiration of some of the projects that we are discussing is actually the vineyards and the grapes. This is the bottle I bought, not the Amarone. I bought the regular Rosso Verona, which is a pretty good one, and it was only $15. So I think it was a good way. But again, using Google Map, I like to give everything and put things in perspective. So we leave Osteria Il Cursore. We had our figurative lunch. And, you know, with an hour car ride on the highway, we are getting to Villa Serego. I hope I pronounce it with the right accent. I'm not from Veneto, I'm more from the Emilia area, and I got scolded by Giacomo and Maria Vittoria for not putting the accent in the right place. So this is where you're getting when you are when you get to Villa Serego, which are nowadays called Cantina Santa Sofia. And like I said, it's in the heart of Valpolicella, and this is also a vineyards and a canteen where they produce the Amarone, they produce the Valpolicella, and all those famous wines. So First of all, it's another Palladian villa. That's why I call this part of the presentation Palladio and the Cellars. Because, you know, although he designed the old villa, and it's pretty unique because it's different from the typical villa that we saw last week, like Villa La Rotonda, that has its famous architecture, pretty much symmetrical. Here has a different shapes. And the most important part is the most characteristic part is the distinctive views of those rusticated columns and the Ionic orders of the columns. The construction started in 1560, and the villa was commissioned back then by Marc Antonio Serrego. You said the name. It was pretty esteemed nobleman at the time. And again, we discussed all of this in the previous webinars, on how, you know, the relationship between Palladio and his client. But here we're going to focus primarily on the cellars, and the cellar, of course, are underground, and particularly on the side of the buildings. So most importantly on these two bigger elements of the buildings. You can see the shot here on the left corners. Now, leaving Villa Serrego, I want to take you into another villa, which is pretty much back to where we were. So here again in the Berici Hills, and we go to Villa d'Aschio a Longarone. Sorry, a Longare. Longarone is another area. It's called Taverna Aeolia, and first of all, I mean, it's already worth visiting the garden and visiting the sites. It's actually nowadays is open to tourists, and when I went to look for more information and sort of to an update to the, you know, what we know and how I could present this villa, I got so many more I don't know, not the Airbnb, I can't think of the name. Of the little owl trip, anyway, sites for visiting and for tourists and information, and you know, it's a pretty nice alternative to the hotels, and I certainly encourage if you are in the area. I didn't go into this one in particular, but I went to something very similar in the Valpolicella. And I can guarantee that the settings is best than a 5-star hotel. The room might probably not have all the luxury because, of course, our ambience and buildings built in the 1500s, so certainly don't have all the comfort and the convenience that we sort of tend to look nowadays. But there's many other that definitely balance this. But again, let's talk about the cellars, because this is again the topic of the conversation. And why is it called Taverna Aeolia? Because his is connected through caves and channels through a Karsic cave, which is also has been used as a cellar for aging the wine. And this Karsic cave basically stored cold air that connected to the building, created what was the very first air conditioning systems, a very natural one. What they did, and here was well described, also this villa was well described in the 4 books of architecture by Palladio. The air was circulating underneath the floor with a sort of floral rosetta. I don't know what would be the translation in English, but basically are perforated decorative round rosoni would be in Italian, where the holes will let the air circulate. And this is actually a story that, you know, about Galileo, which, by the way, is from Tuscany, so in other regions, but still very related to wine. And even Galileo seems to like wine quite a bit. So, long story short, in one party where he was invited, Galileo, by the way, taught in Padua, so in the region, so he was very familiar with this territory and lived here for quite a bit. So he was invited to a party in this villa and apparently drank a little bit too much, fell asleep, and sort of a joke, the owner opened this condotti and he got the rheumatism because the capacity of this sort of traditional air conditioning, it was to, it is nowadays, to bring the ambient temperature that is, if it's outside, is at 33 degrees, which is the equivalent of 95 Fahrenheit. It can bring it down to 16 degrees, which I believe is in the 50, 55. So it's a considerable change in temperatures, just through natural circulations. And again, like I said, not only this villa, but about 10 others, historical buildings have this kind of a natural cooling system. Galileo happened to be in this one, and because of this joke, he got some rheumatism in the arthritis, and that pushed him to study the ventilation system that this villa, so this is why it's called also Villa Eolia. Moving forward, now we are going to our projects here. But we can't do that without a quick stop in Villa Poiana. You can see that it's about an hour, 30 minutes from where we are, from Villa de Schio to Zime, is actually the winery of Zime. Villa Poiana is not too far from Taverna Eolia. I just touch it briefly because it's another Palladian villa. We again covered quite a bit in the previous webinar, but I had to mention because it's a cellar, and this cellar was actually being restored using our Giallo Dorato in the basement. The purpose here is not to store wine and to age it because it's above ground. As you can see from the light, a lot of light coming from more or less the same height. But this was more for a party event, and these are actually shot taken just after the restorations. But now we are going into our major point of this event, which is the Cantina Zime. Zime is a Greek name that means yeast, because it's what is needed to create the wine. And what you're seeing once you get there is basically this amazing architecture, very modern, which was designed by the Venetian architect Moreno Zurlo. And he basically wanted to have this graft of contemporary building in a very remote and rural environment. We have to mention that this building is actually sitting on top of an old quarry. It was actually a sandstone arenaria. So again, stone is a very integral part of the material. You can see the over here the facade. Of course, we're using steel. It's using glass. And I like to point how these elements, all natural, basically integrates and blend very well with stone. And we'll see more later on. But again, stone and wine have very much interconnected. Here is the entrance of the old quarry of, because again, this was a quarry, and you can see here from the chiseled marks, like this one here. This was the very first webinar we did where we talk about quarries. So we refer you to that, but for those of you who attended, definitely recognize this. It's not the same picture, but it's very similar to what we saw over there. And like I said, this was a sandstone quarry. So this is one of the most important reasons why they needed Grassi Pietre to be involved in the project, not only in the finishing phases, which we are typically involved when we are doing, we are working with stone, but in this particular case, we did it at the beginning. The quarry was a sedimentary stone, of course, like all the sandstone and limestone. The difference, and again, this is the topic of the first event, is primarily sandstone is a little earlier than the limestone. So although they're both sedimentary, the sandstone has more quartz. It doesn't have the calcium carbonate that basically cement the particle together. And the sandstone is not a good, a very strong element. It's very, I don't know how to say it. I mean, it's sort of sand compacted together, so it's very friabile would be in Italian. It lose consistency relatively easy versus limestone is more like, it's much harder. So not always is suitable for a certain application. It's certainly great for compounding strength, so great for blocks and for bricks. That's why it was called also la mattonara, because mattonara means brick maker. So going through that, this is another of the original entrance of the quarry, like it used to be. And now we are already inside. This is the Karsik cave, where you can see that is used for aging the wine. But also now, now that it's being converted, it is a restaurant and is a place where, you can have also visit, and you will experience this, which is a very interesting experience of definitely different from most of the canteen that you can see, which by the way are all underground, but being in contact with the actual rock here and not a cement wall make this pretty unique. These are just other shots of the same place from different views, and so I don't have too much to talk about this, I believe, unless there are specific questions. Which, by the way, I'll suggest you. I see some things popping up. I can't really control the chatter coming through, but Maria Vittoria and Giacomo are monitoring that, and if you have questions, please feel free to do that. We should have mentioned this. We wanted to have this conversation more like an interactive one, so with questions, but because of the number, we had to mute all of you. But if you prefer to raise your hand or ask a specific question, you just unmute yourself, and we'll be happy to address that. Or the chat is another way to go about. So now we are, I show you the beginning, first of all, how you will see the building, and once you are inside the building. But now let's step back, I don't know, a few months, I don't know how long it took. Here is actually before we built this. And you can see from the site that we have blocks here. And this is why they ask Grassi Pietre to work on the foundation and not just a regular excavation company. If you're building foundation, typically you want to blast the ground and ground it down to whatever you need, just to make room for pouring the concrete and start elevating the building on top of that. But in this particular case, we just want to save the material because it's a very good sandstone that you can work and you can sell, even better, use it in this building if you can. So we excavated the same way we excavated the quarries, and you can see that the block here, and just look at the comparison, because at the beginning when I saw this picture, I didn't really pay too much attention, but look at the excavator here, and you can see the size of this block. They are typically large block sizes where you can get the large slab of I don't know, 8-10 feet by 6 feet high. So they're pretty considerable here. And look in this picture and look in the next one, which again, our quarry, you can see the analogy and you can understand now why it was worth to excavate in this site, just as you will do in a quarry, rather than just blasting the ground to make room for the foundation. Here is typically our quarry. We're working this quarry nowadays. I just want to highlight for those of you that didn't participate on the first one, these marks here on the ceiling, as well as the irregular carving of these pillars, is because it was done before these machines were available. So these are actually all hand chisel and hand carved. That's why those irregular marks. And now, again, we completed the foundation. This is the site, how it's the way it looks. So you can see here the walls of sandstone, and suppose some of the reinforced one or some of the building, depending on the engineering needs. But this is how we start pouring the foundation once we excavated all the blocks that were necessary. Here we are starting to see, you can see here the cement already being poured. We are still outside, and on this picture here you start seeing the building is already being erected, and the wall is exactly the same exterior wall, but you already have a ceiling, which is going to be also the floor for the floor above. We are, I believe, 2 levels down. So this is the ground level. That's why it's also the depth here. Then you have a second level still underground above, and we have the 3rd level on top. So there's there's 3 levels in these buildings. Only one is above ground, which are the offices. So we'll see later on. We'll start this visit and this tour from the ground up. So here you'll see already completed. You see the barrels, and you see the structure of the buildings. Again, there's pretty much not much to say about this here, other than the how clean and nice and pristine it became, still maintaining as much as possible and the original composition of the quarry. Another shots here, and here we're already at the floor above, so at the 2nd level, but still underground. And what I like about this picture, it features a lot the floor, which in a way can be sort of contradicting, because this looks like a cement poured in place. But I kind of like also the combination of the corten steel, the glass, the cement, and how the stone really blend together. So here is another element where, not necessarily everything has to be stone. Sometimes you have some health and mandatory situation where stone is probably not the best suited. And here is a full other subject that we can open on how to maintain the stone. There's, I think, a lot of ignorance in the market that we should probably address. Is again not the topic of this event, but maybe one of those questions that we can have at the end, because I believe, and coming from the porcelain side and what kind of background, I hear a lot of, no, you got to use porcelain because stone fails here, maintenance cost, and so forth, which is in a way is partially true, but not all is true, and not everything is good for everything. So there's a few myths that I would like to discuss next time. But here we go into the next section, which I call it the cut to size, because besides how do we do these projects? Everybody can pretty much do slabs and tiles. It's doing the complexity that I think we shine, and I think we can give the best value added to the project. I keep on saying, and there's another great argument that I keep fighting over here, because there's this tendency in the United States, give me the slab as big as you can, and I'll cut them over here. And I don't know whether there is a lack of capacity to do a proper survey. Maybe certainly the builder is not building up to standard, but I guarantee you, even in Italy and even in other parts of the world, nobody's building perfectly as it's supposed to be done and how it's designed. Regardless, we can always do the cut to size pretty much everywhere. In the United States, it seems that it's difficult. They don't believe it. It takes too long. When we are probably much faster at doing the cut to size in Italy than doing it here in the United States, and I believe even more economical. So the other message that I want to give here is like, look at the complexity. This is all our stone that can be done in Italy and shipped here, here or wherever the project is, economically and efficiently, without compromising the budget or the schedule of the project. This is the great concept of the architect, I believe. I haven't discussed with him, but it's pretty easy to understand that the Pentagon here, which is the symbol of the Zime winery, it reproduce the leaves of the grapes. And that's why they ask us here to reproduce the pentagon and how these 4 pentagons recreate this hectagon. So again, playing with the harmony of shapes and geometry. This, by the way, is a library for very precious wine. So the risk here was not just to build something that was expensive and then it wasn't really fitting once going to the to the job site, but was also to make in a structural way that if something happened, including an earthquake, all those bottles are not the $15 bottle that I bought at the wine store, but they're probably $150, if not the $500 each, and you can see the amount of bottles. The length of this library is 12 meters, so about 40 feet long. And we've been awarded the Pinnacle Award in 2015 at the Las Vegas Convention. So it's something that we're certainly very proud of. And we'll discuss a little bit more in details how we assemble this together. Here is an example of a dry lay. A dry lay here is pretty straightforward. You just have to put the piece together, making sure that they fit. And in this particular case, I would say probably this is the biggest challenge, just making sure they're not chipped. They all are positioned in the right way. They are tested first on the factory side before they're going to the yard. And they're all numbered because the installer need to understand where to position this puzzle, because basically this is a puzzle. And although the shapes is all the same, there might be some little irregularity on one or support on one that doesn't, has to belong to a certain position and not in any other position. So it is always very important to test the things and also to pack them in the correct way. We'll go more into details in the future slide. Here, let's again move from the grassy cellars to the grassy cut to size, because this is basically a cut to size project. I should have pointed out in the shot of the pictures, you can see this, and it took me a while. It's actually at the floor level. You can see that if you recall the other picture, this was basically the floor where this was sitting on top. And these we are actually looking from the back. So let's imagine that this is the wall side and the actual face is where these pieces are sitting on. So we are actually looking from the opposite way. But it's giving you an idea of the complexity and the structure and what it takes to build it. And of course, it's easy to see once it's done. It's not easy to envision how to do it when you have the blocks that, if you recall, the picture on the foundation, you're facing with. Stairs, another integral part, and again, the combination of this is the Giallo Dorato, and again, you can see that these stats are all different dimension and the cut to size. Why using the slab, ship it over here and having the fabricator cut it so that not only you are adding, and again, I don't want to go into a union discussion, but I suppose the cost of the labor here in the United States, not I suppose, I confirm, is certainly higher than the cost of labor of Italy, but also the machinery. And of course, being a factory, we have benches and CNC machine that are just bigger than what a fabricator could do in the New Jersey, Long Island, or surrounding area of the job site, wherever that be. So shipping cut to size is certainly a great advantage, and this doesn't really take away job from the fabricator, because we are not really trying to bypass the fabricator, which is always an important part. Usually, the fabricator is also the one that installs. The dialogue between us and them is very important, because he will still have to do some adjustment and settings But one thing is to remove a few inches here and there. One other thing is to cut out a quarter of a slab. Besides considering the raw material, sometimes we can use a certain cut to size by starting from the smaller blocks or not premium blocks. If we always have to sell the top and the biggest slab, we always have to start from a premium material. So there's a lot of element. Premium material that gets over here, gets shipped, get loaded, you pay duty, and then you can only use probably a third of it because of wastage and dimensions. We are now at the last floor, which is the first floor. Basically, you can see here, and you can see the winery images that you have by being in the office, in the waiting area, and looking outside at the actual vineyards. So this is certainly, a great image, a great project that we're proud to feature. Other shots of the offices here. Again, I think there's much discussed. The floor is certainly ours, and here is the facade, where we actually use the same sandstone in this case, because of course it makes sense to use, what you can use if it's the most appropriate. And again, how nice it combines with the steel and the stone. So this is, how to, present how we go from one block to the actual project. I'll take you now into another project. We can't really disclose too much into this because it's still a work in progress. But we can share a couple of the shots that we did. We are doing the external facade here. You can see the roof is also the ceiling for the above ground. So this is sort of semi underground. The outfit, by the way, is the same. You can see that kind of the signature is pretty much similar to what we saw before, but it played more with shapes on the outside here. Shots of installation, again, the combination of steels and cement. Here we are actually using the Giallo Dorato, and I should have put better pictures. I suppose I got lost in the reshuffling the presentation last night, but there's a close-up picture of this building, of this wall that actually shows, and you can barely see them here, the fossils that of course are not present in a sandstone. That's how, it's a proof that this is our limestone. And here we are going more into how we got to those pieces and how we present and how we do the cut to size. So you can see that there's a lot of manual labor involved in this particular case because of the size, and I assume also economical and the budget reason. These pieces are assembled by combining them together into a single piece. They are resin, they are reinforced with the net. Also in the corner, this worker is adding some sort of reinforcement because certainly this is a weak spot. These are all important elements that sometimes you don't think when you're designing. You just assume that, oh, let's put them together. But there's a lot of thought and engineering that has to be put into every single piece, especially when the size of the piece are this magnitude. And this is another example of a dry lay where you basically position everything on the job, not on the job site, on the actual factory, because before shipping to the job site, again, you want to make sure there are not major flaws either in the design or in the production, on the construction. Here, like in the other job, the main feature is the shape, but many times, even in something as simple as a floor, you need to do the dry lay, or we encourage to do the dry lay because talking about stone is not always so consistent, and it's important to have the right nuances between one tile and the other so that you don't achieve the checkerboard, unless you want a checkerboard. And even that, you will have to sort of, prove it first that it works, number every piece so that the installer, when he gets to the job site, knows exactly where to put it. And again, like I said, it's imported in fabricated pieces like this, as well as just a very simple tile job. This is the material. You can see here the shots. I wish I had kept that picture where you will see also the other ones, but you can see these are the fossils. And if you take a sandstone, you don't see these elements here. A more sophisticated one with this grigio, and I tried to play this video. Please tell me if it doesn't work. You will see the machinery, how it works and how it finishes. I don't know if you got also the sound. I probably forgot to activate that, but this was a very low sound, not a very high one. And this is the bathtub in his setting. In this particular case here is the grassy showroom. This is why we changed to the last topic of this presentation, where, by the way, we just renewed it, and Maria Vittoria will probably explain a little bit more in detail, so I will leave 2 more minutes for her now. But I just want to highlight here that everything is our cut to size: the tile, the floor, the sinks, of course, not the glass mirror. But is again try to show you how these settings works. We work with other material. You can see here that is a Carrara marble. So we can work also other materials like many fabricators do. We also do. We already have 6 of our own quarries, but you can see here our full library of material. And the shapes are another idea. This door is actually being made with the wooden board that are on the bench where you're cutting the stone. So we try to keep things as faithful as possible. And with this, I will probably, pretty much terminate this presentation for the first time. I stay within my limit, and I will leave it up to Maria Vittoria to sort of take it over and talk a little bit about the showroom and how we can interact with you now that we are still in lockdown and working from home, but also tomorrow that hopefully things will resume, sort of to normal. We hope we kind of enjoyed this event, and we hope that you are still interested in how to take it on. So, Maria Vittoria, if you are there, we'll give you the screen and the microphone.
Thanks so much, Giorgio. If you stop your video connection there, so you stop this share screening, I might try. Let me see if you see me there, and if you see, I mean, I'm in the showroom, so I'll just try to bring you a little bit around. That's the only way we have to show you this evening. There's, of course, a nice video on YouTube that you can find. It's much more professional than what you can see here. But you see, there are a lot of different finishing, and we made this space because when people come here, they need to see the result. They need to see the texture that you can achieve. That's a kitchen countertop done, of course, in Carrara marble. Just to show you a little bit of things that we can produce. We don't want to be, to show you too much, and we don't pretend to have the quality right now, because of course that's just, going with a computer webcam, but at least you get a glimpse. I hope you enjoy. And that's just a first view of what you can get, if you come to Nanto. Here is what you see. That's all what we have done. And I just hope that you like it. Just turn it down and put it down. Were you able to see something here?
Yeah, I think it worked pretty well. Okay. I don't know. I mean, I would like to get the comments from our guest here. Maybe if we can unmute them, we'll give an opportunity, since there's just a handful of people. I think it would be nice to get their comments also.
Yeah. I mean, in the next, we understand the situation is a little bit strange right now because, again, we are grounded here and you are on the other side of the ocean, but that's a way to keep in contact. And by the way, if you have any kind of idea of how we can better, keep in touch with you without bothering you, but keep you updated, let us know. I mean, you can drop off an email to me or to Giorgio and let us know your ideas. No problem. We welcome your feedback anytime.
Sounds good. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really great. One of the things that interested me, I understand what the dropping the quarry and building the building out of it, but some of those hand-carved excavation ceilings were so beautiful. To maintain some of those in those spaces would be just stunning. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But this I think is one of the main point about this webinar that we are trying to do. And again, I mean, there are many little reasons why we are trying to do this. One, of course, is to communicate with you. And sometimes it's like out of bed, maybe different way comes. Because if I were to come into your offices and I will usually bring the catalog and the samples, and you sometimes don't have the luxury of all this activity because you have the phone calls, your colleague is coming in, which is, nowadays activity. But giving you somebody else's example hopefully inspires you to think a little bit more outside the boxes. And what we can do, and the idea is even our showroom should be an example for you to maybe propose to your colleagues or clients. See what has been done over this. What do you think about it? Why can't we do it over here? I mean, to me, the cut to size, like I stressed probably even too much at the beginning, is like mind-boggling. Why do we need to ship here premium slab that you're going to use half of it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Thank you for your time, for coming back. And well, look after our next invitation. It will be in 15 days. And I hope that we will, you will join us again. It's a nice meeting and it's a nice way of keeping together. Giorgio, grazie mille.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
It was excellent. Thank you for the presentation. And grazie, Maria Vittoria.
Grazie, Bianca. Keep in touch. Thank
Sì.
you.
Thank you.
Ciao, arrivederci.
Thank you.
Ciao.